So there's never been a business plan, even right up until more recently. The more places it got into, the more people saw it, and then the more people wanted to buy it, and it sort of snowballs. We used to have lorries delivered down my street at 7 a.m, which the neighbours didn't really enjoy. That was the concept or the idea. So we did it, and then in that morning of April Fool's Day, it became our most popular post ever. The head of food, who I think is now the CEO of M&S, had seen the products somewhere, probably tried them and wanted an M&S version. We basically ran out of money. And then suddenly I realised we were £200,000 owing. Had we fulfilled the last order, we would have made minus 6% margin on one of the products.
This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. Before we start, I have one simple request. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app that you're listening on. Running a business can often be compared to riding a roller coaster. From small beginnings in his kitchen to £1 million worth of orders from M&S and winning awards to cash flow problems and crashing back down, today's guest, Greg Fraser, has ridden that roller coaster. Listen to Greg's amazing story and you'll learn so many business lessons. Today's guest on the Leeds Business Podcast is Greg Fraser, founder of the Bottle Baking Co. Good morning, Greg.
Morning.
And just for clarification, we're not related. So, Greg, take us all the way back to working at Sky and how this whole business idea came from.
Yeah, so Sky was working as a business analyst at Sky, making their website happen, basically. So I had a team of developers that did all the hard work, I guess, in terms of making that happen. The Bottle Baking Co came about as a sideline. So it was just a little hobby that I had on the side. And the idea was to take me to food festivals to start with. So I liked going to food festivals, and this was a good reason to go to them. And it was the Kirkstall Deli Market, actually, is where it all began. So I was baking at home with my son, and at the time he was 2. And I think the movie at the time was Moana. That was the big Disney movie. And you could buy Moana branded cupcakes and whatever cartoon character cupcake kits in the supermarkets, which every time we went down the aisle, he was asking me to buy whatever variation of the cupcakes. But they removed all the chocolate and the sugar and all the, I guess, what's classed as bad stuff. So I could bake from scratch anyway. And we started baking from scratch. So I don't really know how it came about going into a bottle. It was probably just through, I don't know, must have had a bottle or something lying around at the time. We put it in a Coke bottle, really hard to get out. And I had a jar, I think, like a wine carafe thing lying around that we got from IKEA, I think, and put them in there. And it was more just to talk about the layers and talk about what's going in it. And then you could just shake it out like a ketchup bottle, make it a bit more interactive and bake from scratch with ingredients that you know what they are. And you can use chocolate and whatever you want to use. And it just sort of evolved into a thing. I thought people might like to buy it, and then made 3 different flavors to start with, took them down to Kirkstall Deli Market, which was only, I think, a 3 or 4 hour event on a Saturday and a Sunday. It still goes on, but I haven't been to it for a while. And they sold out. So they sold out within the first day, what I expected to last the whole weekend. And had to rush home via all the supermarkets and buy as much as whatever I could to make whatever I could to take down to the next day, because I'd signed up for 2 days. And the same thing happened the next day. So although it wasn't a number of products that we sold, I sold enough to cover what my expected costs were for the first year in that weekend.
There's a little gap there. What was the step from baking with your son and then putting it in a bottle to then going, I might sell these? What was in that little gap there?
I think it was just looking at them on the side, like in the kitchen. So looking at it, it looked visually appealing. So it looked nice. And what we made with it was nice. So I was kind of like, well, that's better than what we've bought. And although it's not comparable against like a kit that costs £1 or £2, whatever it is now in the supermarket, it's not the same. But I was like, well, this looks like it could be a nice thing that people might want to buy. And my friend's wife, she did graphic design and stuff like that. So I was talking to her, and we were like, well, she decided to help out basically. So we came up with some ideas of labeling that we could put on there and the sort of the logo and stuff. So between the two of us, we did that, and just wanted to give it a go really. So I don't really know. There was never a plan. So there's never been a business plan, even right up until more recently. there was a bit of a business plan, I suppose, towards the end, but everything's just evolved. Everything, like, it's always just evolved nicely, and never with a particular, well, I'm going to go and do this and I'm going to go and do that. It just sort of happens, and that's kind of how it started as well, in the same way.
Okay, so you've done 1 weekend at Kirkstall Market. I assume you then go, oh, this is quite good fun. We'll do it again. So where did it go from there?
Yeah, so kept doing Kirkstall Daily Market. I can't remember if that's monthly. I've kind of, it has been such a while since I've been there, but if you're listening, go down there. But I think it was monthly at the time, at least. So booked in for a few months, and then other little events. So there's one called Arts Mix Market in Leeds City Centre. I got a slot on there, which is a Saturday event, and Weatherby Food Festival and things like that. So just sort of working around a few events like that. And Instagram really was the catalyst, as was the first stockist. So I got a message through Instagram from a stockist in Garforth, or from a little deli in Garforth, who wanted to sell the products. They'd seen them at one of these events and they wanted to sell them in their shops. So I was like, well, I don't know how to do that. Like, how do you come up with pricing? Like, I'm selling it for this much at the event. How much would you buy it for? Because you need to make a profit. I need to make a profit. And we can't make it really expensive. So how does this work? And had no idea. We just made it up, really, me and my other half, made up a pricing structure. And then I drove it to the shop in my car and hand delivered it, and sort of literally made to order, because I wasn't holding any stock. And then the same thing happened again. Got another message. Somebody else wanted to stock it. And then most of these things came through Instagram generally, of retailers or shops wanting to sell the products.
Okay, so this was just a little sideline hobby. You're still working, doing it the weekends, evenings, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So where's the next step in the journey then?
Well, so the next step, so I carried on working at Sky for first 3 years at least, of whilst doing all this. The first 2 years of doing the Bottle Bacon Co, it was just doing markets and occasional orders to small independents like that came through. What changed was a distributor, like a food distributor, got in touch just after Christmas. I think I was visiting my parents and driving home from Scotland to Leeds, and I got a call whilst I was in the car on the way home, and it was a distributor. I thought it was a prank. I didn't think it was real, but they were like, we've seen the products. I don't know where they saw them, but they'd seen them somewhere, and they thought they could list them in their catalogue for next Christmas, because that's the sort of timeline they were working to. And I was kind of like, well, I don't know how this, again, I was like, I don't know how this works in terms of pricing, because they want even less cost probably. But the volume could be good, and they had no idea on the volume. But I was like, well, what I've got to lose, I'll give it a go. So signed up with them, got a few products listed with them, and their Christmas orders came through. The first Christmas order came through in July for delivery in end of July, early August, because that's when Christmas happens. And then the first order that came through, I think, was about 1,200 bottles, which at the time I was making them in my kitchen here at my house, after work on an evening or whatever, after my son's gone to bed. That's generally when I was doing it. So I had to draft in parents, friends, family, whatever, to come and help on an evening to make these 1,200 bottles.
So just to put that in perspective, you've been asked for an order of 1,200. Yep. What sort of volume were you doing at that time with sort of markets and shops?
Oh, I'd probably, on an evening, I'd maybe make 50. Like, that would be, and that wouldn't be every day either. That would be like, I'd make 50 one day, maybe a couple of days later do another 50. If I'm doing an event like a Kirkstall Market, I'd maybe sell that 50 there, so I'd make a bit more than that, so I had a bit spare. But that was the kind of volume I was working with at the time.
So 1,200 at that point is properly off the scale, isn't it?
Yeah, and I didn't have boxes either. So like, I didn't have any, like, you having to send them in boxes of 6 to the distributor, then send on to their stockist, and I didn't have a way of packing them. Like, I just had to buy boxes that were roughly the right size and fill it full of packing pallets and stuff to start them rattling around. And then I'm like, well, how do you ship a pallet to, where were they? Ipswich, I think, is where they were based. I'm like, well, I had to then send pallets from my garage to Ipswich, and figure that out. So so that was a challenge. And then, but the next month in August, the next order came through, and it was bigger. It was like 1,500 units. And I was like, I can't, like, I've been working every night after work and on a weekend and drifting people in. And I was like, I can't do this every month for the next 6 months until Christmas. So, so that's when I had to look at outsourcing the production to somebody else, because I couldn't keep up with that on my own and work a full-time job and do childcare and all that sort of stuff that comes with it. So
Okay. So how do you outsource bottled baking goods? I mean, I assume there's nobody who sort of does that normally.
no. So it was a challenge. But again, like things just sort of happen. So I don't know how these things happen really, or how this has all happened. But initially I was buying things like all the sugar and the flour. I was having to go to the supermarket and clear the shelves of all the sugar and flour because it was golden caster sugar I was using, and they don't hold loads of that generally in all the retailers. So I had to go drive around all the shops and clear them out. And then I found a supplier that could sell me 25 kilo bags of that sugar. That was the problem. It was really the sugar I couldn't get hold of. So I found a supplier that could sell me that, who was based in Driffield in East Yorkshire, and they could deliver to my house. Or sometimes they deliver to Skye, and I'd go and meet them in my car, and we'd like be offloading from a lorry into the boot of my car. It's just crazy. But it was their sales rep. I met her for coffee one morning, and she was like, "Oh, well, you do know that we can make stuff as well. We don't just supply ingredients." And I had no clue about that either. So went to meet them and had a tour around their production site. And they had this little sort of, not broom cupboard, but it was like a really small section of their factory that was just a dumping ground, really. A clean dumping ground. But it was like they just stored stuff there. And they were like, well, we could probably make it for you. And that's what happened. So so we kind of came to an agreement on pricing that worked, and they supplied a lot of the ingredients anyway, so it kind of made sense in some ways. And they, in the early days, they really helped because they had all the food accreditations that I didn't have in my kitchen. So strictly speaking, although I had a food audit, I didn't have anything more than that. So they gave me the next level up to be able to deal with bigger retailers because we had all the traceability, all the food accreditations that you need in this kind of food world. And I could turn them on and off as and when I needed them. So if I just needed 50 bottles, 100 bottles making, they would make those. If I needed 1,000, they would make those.
So apart from outsourcing manufacturing, what other issues did that sort of step up bring to you?
There probably weren't a lot of issues at that time. It was more balancing. I suppose it was shipping became a thing. So as it grew, obviously I was fulfilling orders from my garage. I couldn't store stock in my garage. I've only got a normal size garage. So it was figuring out how logistics really, how and where to ship stuff from, how much I could store here, getting deliveries here. So I used to have lorries delivered down my street at 7 a.m, which the neighbours didn't really enjoy because they'd be offloading pallets. So I think I probably got 3 pallets maybe in my garage. But I didn't have any means of moving the pallet from the driveway into the garage. I didn't have like a trolley or anything. So it was, that was probably the most difficult part, I suppose, at that point. And also kind of taking the point, like at what point do I get a space? Do I start investing in the business and get like a warehouse or something like that, or staff to help do those things? Because there's only so much time in the day that you can do stuff as well. So
okay. So we've been through this first Christmas and you've got some proper orders. Where's the next step change in the business?
Next step was probably taking on the first employee. So I don't think I was an employee even at this time because I was still working the other job. So it was taking on Kelly, who was part-time initially to start off doing the packing of the orders and helping with phone calls or emails and customer queries and stuff like that. So it was quite a broad role she ended up doing. But but that was probably the first bit. And she started at the same time as I took on a small unit. It was really small at Church Fenton Airport. And we kind of moved into there and grew, really. It was around COVID time, I think. So we were kind of in the right place, right time with COVID in terms of our product, because it was baking. People like to bake during that time, and gifting as well. So people like to gift things. So we saw a bit of an uplift, even though it was growing anyway. It kind of boosted our business, I guess, at the time. So it's probably around that time, around the COVID time, when it grew.
So, I've spoken to lots of people, and obviously the vast majority of business owners had a bit of a shitty COVID. Yeah. I assume COVID, and I'll use the phrase very carefully, was good, was a good time for you guys?
It was. I mean, initially, I actually closed the website because I was sending everything from our garage, and I didn't want couriers coming and going from the house like multiple times a day with the family and stuff. So we closed the website, so we weren't shipping anything, and we'll see you when we see you, basically. But then I started seeing other people posting online about how busy they were in the food world. This is like, so friends that I'd made, and they were saying how busy they were, and it's going crazy for them, and it was really good. And I was kind of like, well, I need to do something about that. Then how can we do this? And that's when I found this extra space. So yeah, so it was a good, in terms of sales, it was a good time for us. Production was a challenge because getting staff to work in the production site, although it wasn't necessarily my problem because we'd outsourced it. It was a challenge for them to get hold of staff. So that was probably the next problem that I had to deal with in trying to help them recruit, even though it's not my business. I was trying to help them get people in to produce more stuff. And because we couldn't really keep up with demand, we were selling out constantly, which I know is a good problem to have.
Okay. So you've mentioned your first employee, and you said, you weren't employed by the business at that point. When did you make that flip? Because with startup businesses, the step from a salary to relying on your side hustle creates a huge gap, doesn't it? So talk us through that decision and the thought process behind it, and when it actually happened.
Yeah, so I kept it going for as long as possible because I actually quite liked my old job as well. So I quite liked doing that job, and it was quite, again, I'll go back to COVID times. We all had to work from home, so I could work from my new warehouse space to, I could have one screen for Sky and one screen for Bottle Big and go and kind of do both. And that's kind of how it happened for quite a while. But for us, the products are so seasonal. Christmas, which starts in July, so from July until Christmas time, for us, it was just so busy, and like trying to keep on top of everything was just too much. It got to like the Christmas time, I was like, I'm not doing this again. Like, I'm not doing Christmas whilst doing two jobs ever again. Like, I'll take time off if I have to. So I did. So the next year I took 6 months off, unpaid, from the day job, and then never went back. So because it was a good Christmas, we did well, we made a decent profit. Therefore I could pay myself almost what I was getting in my old job. And it made sense. You
said you were listed in sort of 800 plus retail outlets, and you've now got, it's your full-time job. How does that then change the business? What does it start looking like there? Where are the pressure points coming?
Well, it is the stock. Stock was always a problem, challenge, getting hold of and having enough stock. And financially, that wasn't necessarily a problem because we made good profits at Christmas time, and the costs of the business weren't that high. Really, the space that we were in was actually quite cheap, and it was only one and a bit employees, I guess, that I was paying for, me and Kelly. And then it was trying to just keep on top of all the things. So social media, doing social media posts daily on multiple platforms, the stock, trying to keep the website up to date, doing accounting stuff. So that's not really my forte. It doesn't really drive me. So that quite often got left, and then suddenly you've got to do a VAT return or something, and then you're like, I've got to catch up all the accounts for the last 3 months and get all that done. So it was trying to balance all the different things whilst coming up with new products and new sales, and really it was just trying to do all the things with just me and one other person.
Before we continue, I want to talk to our viewers and listeners about the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal has two sides to it. My side of the deal, I bring you every week inspirational, motivational, and fascinating business owners like Greg, totally free of charge. Your side of the deal, dear listener and viewer, is to recommend this podcast to one other person that you feel will get a benefit from it. Very, very simple. So that's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. Sound like a fair deal, Greg?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Okay, so you're now, let's put this in perspective. You're now employed by the business. You've got half an employee. You've got a small warehouse at Church Fenton. Mm-hmm. The business could only exist at that size for a certain amount of time. How did you step things up from there?
Again, it kind of evolved. So it's kind of, there was, again, no plan. So the first part of that, I suppose, was diversifying slightly. So the Bottled Baking Co. is kind of restrictive in its name, in that you can only really do things in a bottle that are to do with baking. So we had an idea of doing a range for pets. So again, referencing COVID, lots of people got pets and were spending lots of money on their pets. And we had an idea of a product where you can make your own dog biscuits or your dog cakes or whatever it is, but didn't really want to put that under the Bottle Bake & Co name because it might confuse people as to what they're buying. So it was coming up to April Fool's Day, and we came up with a fake product, which was a bottle with ready-made biscuits, and we just changed the logo to call it Doggy Baking Co. Just to kind of test the waters, really. So we put it out there as a bit of a marketing ploy. Say, this is our new product, launched on April Fool's Day, to see what the response was. Because if people loved it, we go, great, we'll make it happen. If they hated it, thought it was a really bad idea, we go, it's just April Fool's, doesn't matter. So that was the concept or the idea. So we did it, and then in that morning of April Fool's Day, it became our most popular post ever. We had so many comments. We had retailers saying, stick it on our next order when you send us our order. And a magazine got in touch wanting to feature in the magazine as well. So we were like, okay, this is clearly a good thing. People want this, but it didn't exist. So that was something I had to turn around fairly quickly to try and make into a brand and a product line that we could sell. But there's learnings there as well. So when it comes to doing dog or pet products, the food accreditations again, or the guidelines are different. It's actually harder to make pet food than it is to make human food. So I didn't know that to start with. So got a little bit in trouble initially about that, but we sorted it out. It's fine. But yeah, that was part of it, diversifying into a different area that didn't keep us all in just the baking for people lane.
I love that. I love that. People often talk about testing market fit and testing market products. That's a brilliant way of testing whether somebody's going to bite or not. Because like you say, you've got the backwards way out of going, it was only a joke.
Yeah,
it's great. I love it. So did that mean you needed, how did you up the processing capability of the business to do that?
The whole warehouse was, I think, 800 square foot total, and we didn't have height either. You couldn't stack anything. So it was quite a small space, and we didn't have a lot of room to be able to do that. So, yeah, but we made it work. So we kind of had to take on more staff, like I say, and just made it work from that space. I think the next big thing would have been when Marks and Spencer got in touch, wanting to list products into their stores. That was really like the next level of everything in terms of excitement, but also stress, and probably when everything changed actually, from a business and from me personally, when it all, maybe for the negative, started to come in. Much more negatives came into the business at that point for lots of different reasons.
Okay, so just talk us through that. What was it? An email, a phone call? Marks and Spencer's come calling is quite a big thing for a small business.
Yeah, again, I thought it wasn't real. So they sent an email through the contact form on the website. And you get so much junk through the website like that. It's mostly people trying to sell you something or whatever. It's normally rubbish. So most of that stuff wasn't true. So when that came through, I was like, I don't know if this is real. But there was a phone number. So I was like, well, I'll give them a phone call and drop them an email back and see. And it was genuine. So it was real. So it's kind of, again, a backhanded compliment in that they said somebody, the head of food, who I think is now the CEO of M&S, had seen the products somewhere, probably tried them and wanted an M&S version. I think M&S have got a bit of a reputation for copying, which I know they have complained to Aldi about them copying, but they all do it. So anyway, so they kind of said they were going to just do it themselves, but they couldn't find a manufacturer that would handle glass in the factory. Most people don't want glass in the factory because if it breaks, it's a nightmare. And if you handle glass, you probably don't handle dry food. So they couldn't find anyone to make it in their existing supply chain. So they thought they'd come to us instead of copying us, which I guess is nice, but they would have copied us if they could. And that was it was quite a tight timeline. So it was around March, I think, for a product launch in September. So they wanted them in for Christmas, and they gave me a brief. It needed to be a Colin the Caterpillar brownie and a Percy Pig blondie, and that was it. So it was then left to me to figure out what that would be and come up with the recipes, which is quite interesting because I'm not a food technologist. I haven't got any experience. Well, I have experience, but I don't have any qualifications in it. So it was funny, really, having a big brand like that asking me to come up with a product that's going to be on their shelves that I've developed in my kitchen in my house. But it happened, and we made it happen. And they're actually really nice products. I think still even now were some of my favorite ones. But that was interesting for a company like that to get in touch.
How did that feel when you saw that on the shelves in M&S?
Oh, when it was in there initially, it was really good. Like, I mean, the stress of getting to that point was hard. There was a lot of work for everyone included. So at that point, there was only, me and Kelly and maybe one other, I think, had just joined the company. So only like 3 of us in the company, plus the 2 ladies that were packing the products internally. And then, so there was still, and we were still in our little warehouse and stuff. So we learned a lot on our co-packer, and they had to do a lot of adaptations, even though they were working to a really high level. M&S is a next level of complexity when it comes to food safety and all that. And because it was their own brand name, not our brand name, there was even more scrutiny over it. So to get to that point, it was hard work, but it was really good getting to see it. And then I got to go and meet Percy Pig and have my photo taken with him and all that stuff at a store nearby and stuff. So it was quite fun to do that. And to launch it, I think the day it came out, we were doing a trade show somewhere. So we had a little secret box that we'd made and did a big reveal and stuff like that on the stand, even though we couldn't sell them there. But it was a bit of a promotional thing. So it was really good to see them in there. So
okay. Now you listeners, if they were listening carefully, you alluded to it there. You said it was the start of the problems. So can you expand on that?
So I guess. So up to that point, it was the business being was, I suppose, quite profitable. I never took any money out of it. All the money always went back into the business rather than a salary. That was it. So we were doing quite well, and it was working all right. And then M&S came along, wanted their products. I think at the time, because of the timeline, we had to start making our Christmas stock. And because it was so slow to make, we had to start making Christmas stock, I think, in May. So we were making it sort of May, June, and a bit of July for our own bottle baking code Christmas stock. And then M&S was going to get made in July and August, ready for delivery in September. But then we had to block out production then for September and I think October for M&S at the end as well. And I hadn't really done any proper planning. So I was like, we've got money in the bank, it's fine. And then suddenly, because we were making and stockpiling so much stock and investing so much money into stock, that was just dead money until we sold it in September for our own stuff. We basically ran out of money. So, and then suddenly I realized we were £200,000 owing to the co-packer, which I couldn't pay them because we didn't have any money until we sold our stock, and we weren't going to sell it until September. We'll get paid for it at least until September. Meanwhile, they were still making the M&S stock, which was due to go out, and they paid quite quickly, M&S. But it was just dealing with that. I guess because I hadn't planned it, I just assumed the money we had in the bank was fine, because it always had been. Hadn't really anticipated the jump it needed to do that sort of volume, because it was a big volume of units. And so that was a worrying time, because then I'm like, well, what are we going to do for money? How do we operate? How do we pay these people? Like, what's next? So so that was probably the first major issue that we ever had.
How did you sort that problem out?
I got a loan. So there was the Northern Powerhouse Fund, which I think has relaunched again recently, but they spoke to them, and they lent us quite a chunk of money, and we're very tight rules around it. We had to pay almost half of it back in January. So we borrowed this money probably in July, August time, and then had to pay a huge amount back in January, which we did, and it was fine. But it was quite risky, I think, from my perspective, borrowing that amount. I could buy a house for that kind of money that we borrowed. It was crazy. But it was very stressful time. And it's probably my bad planning. I should have done more cash flowing on that kind of thing. But like I said, that's not really my forte. So didn't. So,
okay. Okay. And at this point, you still 100% own the business? Because I know you then, at some point, you took on inward investment, didn't you? How did that come about?
Yeah, so that was, that's still 100% of the business at that point. What we did, M&S enabled us to grow the team and to grow the building. We needed a bigger building because we didn't have enough space. We moved to a place in Leeds, near Leeds City Centre. And the plan was to bring in more production into that site. So it would make it cheaper, in theory, doing it in-house. And we were still doing the dog stuff, and that was growing, so we needed more space for that anyway. So we're like, well, if we've got people making the dog stuff, it's no different to the human stuff. So we'll make some of the they're less popular maybe flavors in Leeds, and the go back can do the volume stuff, including M&S. And the profits at M&S were pretty good at the time, so that enabled us to fund this place and grow into it. The plan was it should have lasted us at least 5 years to go into. But bringing in that sort of production brings more challenges. So we had nightmares with the roof. The roof collapsed like about a month after we moved in. There was an issue with the roof, and then we had huge leaks, and everything got destroyed in the whole building. It was dreadful. And those were just some of the problems to deal with. And at one point we had about 25 production staff in Leeds doing the production, which meant most of my time, despite me having an operations manager, was spent on production or managing that operation, not sales, not new products. And that was detrimental, I think, to the business in some ways, because no one was focusing on the bigger picture. Everyone was focused on the right now, not what we're doing in the next 6 months. Everybody wants new products. There were no new products for at least a year. And that was having an impact on everything. So I got introduced to a different packing company who could semi-automate some of this stuff, and they could do the pet stuff, and they could do the human stuff, and they could do lots of different formats as well, lots of different packaging formats, whether it be a bag or a box or whatever, not just the bottles. And that was attractive. So as part of speaking to them, we got introduced to their owner, and basically a conversation of investment came up. So they were going to invest in the production line, into buying some machines that didn't make the products, but they helped dispense ingredients and move things along a line a bit more quickly, and increase the level of production from 2 units per minute to 8 per minute, which is great. It means we don't have to sit on so much stock for such a long time in advance, because we can make it much more quickly. And they would invest in the business, because you always need money for something. So it just sort of helped to help invest in growing the business as well. So I gave up some of the shares in the business for the investment into our business, and they separately invested in the production line as their own company. People like the products, and they were selling and repeat purchasing as well. So it's not like people buy it and then think that's great and then but never buy it again. People coming back and buying it time and time again. M&S was doing really well. They kept them all year round. It was meant to just be for Christmas. They kept them in the Colin and Percy lines at least in for 18 months in the end. They only got delisted really because the cost of producing them was so high. The chocolate costs and labor costs and everything went up so much. Chocolate's gone up more than 100%. It's probably close to 200% now in the last couple of years. Labor has gone up, well, goes up every year. Obviously this year with the tax and national insurance and stuff as well, that's having an effect. And that's a challenge, I think, especially with our product, with it's in a bottle, you have to fill the bottle up. So you can't, you see all the time with bars of chocolate, they're shrinking them down, right? So the big Cadbury's bars used to be 200 grams, they're like 180 now or less in some cases. But the price is more and you get less. So shrinkflation is the word, isn't it? We couldn't really do that.
Hindsight is absolutely wonderful. The business was 50% of the business was relying on one client, and lots of businesses sort of fall into this. It's almost like a honeypot trap, isn't it? You can't turn the business away, but how do any learnings from that relying on one client for so much of the business?
I think so. Well, I mean, up until that point, it had already been kept spread quite well. So we had our direct to retailer stuff, we had the distributor element of it, we had the direct to consumer online stuff, and they weren't equal, but they weren't far off equal in terms of the numbers, or at least the margins made up for it. If it was direct to consumer but less sales, we made more profit on that. So it was always quite well balanced. And then obviously that customer came in and skewed it quite heavily, and then grew it way beyond what even they imagined, I think, because they doubled the order instantly when they saw it was selling so well. And then maintaining that volume was great in one sense, but like I say, it's a lot of eggs in one basket, which always tried to avoid up until then, at least. But I think part of the problem actually was back to I was too busy doing all the other things, dealing with our own internal production. I probably wasn't spending that much time with M&S or working on the new products or trying to maintain that relationship as well as maybe I could have had I not been too busy doing all the other stuff. And maybe it would have been differently had we been better engaged. I don't know. I mean, I think we were quite well engaged, but maybe not. I don't know. But I don't really know how to avoid that, really, because like I said, they would have done it with somebody else. If it wasn't us, they would have done it anyway. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's all right to just let them do that, and we just focus on us. Maybe that's a learning. Focus on what you're doing. Forget what other people are doing. If it's not right for you, don't do it. I think I was drawn into it and the excitement of, well, this is massive. Look at the numbers. We're going to make loads of money here. And maybe that's not, but it's not what it's all about.
I don't want to preempt things, but talk us through the last sort of 6 months or so.
Yeah. So, well, last 6 months or so. So should I go in with the ending as to where we are now? Is that easier?
Let's go with the ending and go backwards then.
Get the elephant in the room. So the company is now in liquidation, or has gone into, the limited company has gone into liquidation. That happened about 2-3 weeks ago. Getting to that point, so obviously margins are hit. We lost the M&S customer. We brought in other products and other brands, either through investment or acquiring through administration, one of them as well, to help diversify a bit more. So with it being so seasonal, the massive peak at Christmas, and then literally no one buys it in from May, June, July, and no one's buying the products until the Christmas orders go out. But you still got all the costs and loan repayments and everything else that comes with that now. So we were trying to diversify into other areas. So confectionery was one of them. More everyday boxed baking kits is a more recent one. We never really got that off the ground enough because it was so recent, that just because people buy those kind of things more frequently throughout the year. So lower price point, but you should sell more volume was the theory. So that was probably 6 months plus ago that we started doing that a bit more, reducing some of the costs and some of the overheads. So marketing spend quite high. So it was just looking at trying to rein it in a bit whilst we regain sales for the loss of M&S, which we had done. So if you took out M&S completely, the business had grown every year. But if you put M&S back in, it was a decline, I guess. But and the margins being eaten into meant the profits were much lower than they were before anyway. So although we sell them more, we're not making as much money, but we've got huge costs. So we came up with a plan which would have lasted at least 6 months, or would have got us to a 6 month point, which meant losing some of the team, losing the marketing people that we had outsourced, so losing marketing spend, and cutting back on a few other things like that. And reducing my salary was one of those things. Another person in my team reduced her days, therefore her salary as well, just to kind of get us through to the point of Christmas again, because we knew it'd be busier and give us more chance to focus on sales and new customers. So that was what we did, and that's what happened in January. But obviously we didn't make it to the 6 months. Lots of reasons for that. The sales January were as expected. February were tracking on track, and our salesperson left the team. And then I think in the beginning of March, when I looked at that, we weren't tracking. An order had been moved from February into January, but the system still counted it in February anyway. So we were £20,000 out in February, more than I expected. And that really was kind of the nail in the coffin, really, because we needed to make those sales every single month. Otherwise we were so close to the wire in terms of cash flow that any drop meant we just had no cash. So that's kind of what happened, really. There's a bigger story to it. There's more to it than that. It's quite a simplistic view of it. We worked very closely with our co-packer, but we had the credit facility was hugely reduced, which meant we had to repay a huge amount of that credit to them, which meant we came into the new year with 100 grand less in the bank than we planned. The cash flow document had a cash flow that a percentage margin that we were using that was probably 10% higher than the true margin that we were getting after all the costs came off. So a combination of all those things combined meant we basically ran out of money, and didn't have enough money to pay what we had to go out at the end of, in March time. So we couldn't pay the bills in March is when it was. So we had to make a call on what to do. And there weren't really any other options at that point. We couldn't borrow more money, or didn't want to borrow more money. And I don't think we would have got it anyway. So, so unfortunately, the company itself went into liquidation.
Okay. Might be an obvious question. How do you feel about the whole journey now?
I don't know. So it's an interesting question. I'm not sure. So, I mean, there's so many positives. there's a lot of negatives, a lot of stresses, a lot of strains, and I've done some like reflection. I kind of did a document for no one else really other than myself the other day, where I was just kind of going through, and it was kind of like, what went well, when did I enjoy it, what did I not like, when did it all change, and that's when I identified like kind of when it all changed. There were probably a few times when it all changed, and what would I do differently. So although obviously it's ended in a way that I hadn't really anticipated, that wasn't never the plan. I think, I don't know. I don't really know how I feel really. It's kind of still quite new, isn't it? So it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of, well, I could do something else now. What do I do? Do I go back to do my old job? Something like Sky, or I've learned so much over the last 9 years. There's so much knowledge there that can be shared, which is kind of why I'm speaking to you. There's lots that I could do with it. So I don't know. So it's still a bit, the way it ended isn't ideal, and I don't want to point fingers and names, point blame or anything like that. But I think we could have probably done it differently. And there's lots of things that could have been done differently. But it's hindsight, isn't it?
I love the idea of doing that document for yourself. I think that's I've not heard of anybody doing that before. I think it's a really, really great idea. And it's probably worth sticking in the drawer and leaving it for 6 months and then having a look at it again.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, whatever it is you decide to do, all the best from all of us at Leeds Business Podcast and everybody that's listening. Before we finish, I ask all our guests to give a shout out to one other Leeds business. So who are you going to give a shout out to?
It's the Biscuitery. So I think they've been on here and they've been shouted out before, but they're a good team. So so I met them actually at one of the events that I did years ago, one of the early days ones. I think it was Oakwood Market. There was a little market there. So they were there and I was there. I think we were next to each other for the day. I think we all sold hardly anything that day. So we just stood around talking. But so I kind of met them there and on and off, bumped into them at like an awards do and stuff like that. So kept in touch. And then when they heard what had happened with the business, they've reached out and been really kind, and I've gone to meet them, had biscuits and stuff. So really, they're really nice little niche product, I guess, but seem to be doing good things, and a nice team too.
So there'll be a link to the Biscuitery in the show notes below. There'll also be a link to Lisa and Saskia's episode, and they also produce the Leeds Business Podcast biscuits as well. So big love to Lisa and Saskia. Thank you very much.
Cool, thanks.
So that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you hit the follow button so every new episode gets sent straight to your phone. See you next week.